All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike Dane with MLS Technology. We had a little bit of an issue earlier today with our webinar not functioning properly, but found out that it was just somebody sharing a meeting time with us. So anyway, we're all set. We're finally functioning the way that it's supposed to be. So we're going to get started with the CMAs and Matrix class in just a bit here. I did want to run through just a couple things before we actually start with the course content. To let you guys know, you're all going to be starting on mute by default. I'll be showing you guys an option in a minute here that'll allow you to go through the process of getting unmuted if need be. We also have a Q&A button down at the very bottom of the screen. If you guys have any questions during the course, make sure that you funnel those into the Q&A section. Also, there is a chat section down there at the bottom. Make sure that if you have any comments or stories you want to share, pretty much anything that's not a question, go ahead and post those into the chat section. I also wanted to mention as well, the chat section is going to be used a bunch during this particular webinar. We're going to be asking for examples of criteria that you guys are using, etc. So make sure that you guys keep that available and remember where that's located. The session will be recorded. We'll get a link sent to you guys after the class is over. For those of you guys who are registered for this morning's realist class, I'm going to be sending out a recording of the one of the previous times that we've taught that class, so you guys can still get the information that you were hoping for this morning. Also, if you guys have any audio or video issues during this course, please make sure to let us know immediately. Part of the reason why we want to reinforce that you need to do that immediately is because we don't want anybody to miss out on getting the CE credit. If you guys have some kind of technical problem or anything like that, we want to make sure that we're able to get that corrected as quickly as possible so you don't miss out on that CE credit. All right. The CE credit as well, just as a reminder, we will get that information sent off to OREC pretty quickly after the class is over today. I did at least want to point out that the CE credit is sent quickly over to OREC, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to immediately show up on your license. So if you notice any delays on that part, you can always get in contact with us to make sure that it's been sent, but more likely than not, it's just waiting on their system to represent the credit that you've earned. All right. So as far as the buttons go, I wanted to mention again, the chat section down there at the bottom. Remember where that's located. We're going to be using that a bunch. We also have a Q&A section. Again, the Q&A section is going to be more important if you guys have a question that you would like to ask during the course. And then finally, we have the raise hand option. So if you guys end up needing to ask a question with your voice, you can ask with the raise hand button. I'll just assume that that means that you guys need to be unmuted, and we'll get you unmuted so you can ask your question. Now, if you are joining us on a mobile device, you're going to need to tap the screen in order for those same buttons that we just described to appear. So if you have a question that you would like to ask, or if you guys would like to raise your hand or post in the chat, anything like that, you're going to need to tap the screen and then those buttons should appear. So beyond that, if you guys do end up having any technical issues during the course, again, make sure to let me know in the chat, Q&A, hit the raise hand, whatever option is readily available to you. But if you get fully disconnected and you guys need some assistance, you can always reach back out to us at the service desk. I've got our contact information pulled up here so that you guys can go ahead and reach out to us if need be. But I think beyond that, we should be set. Let me make sure. We should be set. All right. So in that case, I'm going to go ahead and launch a little poll. This poll is going to be directly related to the CE credit, so I do need everyone to participate. Make sure to hit the options that are available there. We've got only 2 questions. It's very simple. Are you new to real estate, and have you ever made a CMA before? In part, this is going to allow us to kind of curate some of the way that we discuss some of the things. I just want to make sure that we are giving a little bit of extra context for those of you guys who either haven't created a CMA before, or for those of you who are new to real estate. I just want to provide some additional context to the logic and the reason why you might end up needing this. Looks like I need one more person to respond, and then I should be able to move on. Oh, perfect. Okay. We're all set. Thank you guys so much. Since everybody's here at the beginning of class, all of you at the moment are eligible for CE credit as long as you guys stick around to the end. So from the looks of it, it looks like we have actually a pretty sizable majority of you guys are new to real estate, or at least relatively new. It looks like there's only a couple of you that have not created a CMA before, but that's okay. We'll be giving you guys a lot of guidance on this to make sure that you understand what this is and why we're doing it. All right. So in Matrix, we have two different kinds of CMAs. We're going to be covering the quick CMA after we discuss the basic principles of finding comparable properties, and then we're also going to be briefly discussing the CMA wizard at the end of class. Now, for those of you who are new, the CMAs are what are called a comparative market analysis. That's what the acronym stands for, comparative market analysis. And effectively, this is just going to be providing us a broad picture of a small area. I'm going to pull up my search function here. I did want to address, whenever we're discussing CMAs, I think a lot of people end up having this notion that this is only going to be applicable for if you guys are going to be listing a property. This is something that you guys can prepare for sellers to ensure that you guys are getting the correct price set up for them. But this is also something that can be provided to buyers. This could be a great way to try and reinforce the pricing of the property, or maybe even use this as a way to try and figure out what the true market value is of a property in order to get an offer put in. So there's a variety of different ways for you guys to be able to get this set up, and there's pretty much no limitations on the audience that these could be prepared for. So as I mentioned, some of the reasons why we would need to create a CMA are going to be the initial step whenever we're going through the process. Sorry, I realized I was still sharing that poll result. So when we're going through the process of listing a property, the CMAs can be used to try and ensure that the price that we're going to be giving the property is accurate. Sometimes this is something that people are going to have their kind of knee-jerk response on, and then make sure that they try and reinforce that. Other times, people are just going to end up using just the raw data to try and provide that. But as you guys become more comfortable with how to do pricing on properties, a little bit more familiar with the market, it's kind of going to start to come naturally. So you may end up looking at the property and be able to kind of get an assessment right away. Then these CMAs can be used to try and reinforce that value. We also, again, as I mentioned already, have the option to create a CMA for buyers. So for instance, if you are in a situation where a buyer is intending to make an offer on a property and the price is maybe just a little bit higher than what they were hoping to pay, you can always run a CMA for the buyer to ensure that they either see that, yeah, this is actually the true market value for that property, or maybe the offer needs to come in at something a little bit lower and the expectation that that might be a realistic number for the property so that it can actually sell rather than just sitting on the market for months or whatever. Anyway, let's go ahead and start off with doing a little bit more of a practical demonstration. So we're going to get into using Matrix. Now, everything that we're going to be doing today is going to revolve around Matrix. There are some CMA tools in other systems. For instance, Realist, which is a kind of companion app to Matrix, has the option to create CMAs on a property by property basis. You also have the ability to do this CMA process in RPR. For those of you guys who have not used RPR before, I can't stress enough how important and useful it can be. It's a tool that's been developed by the National Association of Realtors. So if you guys are going to be anywhere in the country, you guys can use this app no matter which MLS you're a part of. It's fantastic. But there's a CMA process, some of which we're actually going to be discussing the important elements of while we're doing things in Matrix. So, but from our practical perspective today, everything that we're going to be doing is going to revolve around that first example that I gave, which is trying to get a property priced correctly for the initial listing. So what we're going to be focusing in on is that listing presentation and trying to get the CMA report set up so that we can bring that information to our seller tonight. So first and foremost, this is where we're going to start using our chat section down at the bottom. So make sure that you guys have that ready. And we're going to talk about the actual steps involved trying to get to the final product. So when you guys are preparing a CMA for a listing presentation, what is the first thing that you guys are doing or that you guys have been told to do for those of you who have not created a CMA yet? So what is the absolute first step in creating a CMA for a listing presentation? I'll go ahead and give you guys some time to type that out. So we have some people that are already talking about the uh, comparable properties. So some of the criteria that we might be using to find the comparable properties. But again, we're trying to focus in on what's going to be the very first thing that you need to do if we're trying to prepare a property for a comparable search. Pull up previous price. That might work. And actually, Robert's on the right path at least. So when we're first going to be looking at the listing presentation, or excuse me, the property to create the CMA for the listing presentation, what we might need to do instead of actually starting to find the comparables themselves, we need to double check that the history of the property is clear and also what the specifications of the property is. So instead of trying to narrow down our focus with what comparables, we need to find out what the raw data is for those comparables. So what I'd suggest doing is actually pulling up the tax record information. So rather than relying on a previous listing, which might have some old data in it, they might have made improvements, they might not have entered the listing data properly the first time around, we're just going to go straight to the county assessor's office, make sure that we have the information from there to validate whatever the owner has been indicating to us are the attributes. So I'm going to go to my search, go down to public record here. And this is going to provide us with a tax record search, the exact same functionality that we had in Relist. So what we're going to be seeing here is we're going to have a owner name that we can use. We can type in just simply an address. If there was maybe a little bit more ambiguity to what the property is physically, or like where it's actually located, trying to find the tax record, we do have a map search. Or if you guys can pull this out of the client, if they actually have the information, you can also use the parcel ID, a tax ID, APN number. I think some places like Muskogee County have the tax parcel number is actually referred to as the account number. There's a variety of different ways for it to be searched, but what we're going to be doing when we end up finding the information is again trying to ensure that we have all the details about this particular property in advance of trying to find comparable properties. So I can double check as well that we're actually speaking to the owner so that we're not ending up getting all this information prepared and then we find out that we're talking to somebody who's not directly related to the property or doesn't have the right to sell the property. But further down on this, we're also going to be able to find our characteristics. So I can see, all right, so it's got 3 bathrooms, 1 full bath, 1 half bath. So these numbers apparently don't add up. And then also, since this happens to be in Tulsa County, we don't see the bedroom count. But the good news is, because we've actually done our public record search here in Matrix, instead of having to come back into Matrix and run a separate search to try and find out the other history of this property, we can literally just click on a button here that says last listing. Then we can go back and validate with the client. All right, so it's seeing, looks like 3 bedrooms. Is that correct? 2 bathrooms that are full, 1 bathroom that's half. So all of this information can kind of just be validated effectively with just one search in the public record search. So rather than having to do a tax record search in one system and come back to find the other listings, we can do it all at once. There's also going to be a handy button right here for history. that allows you guys to move back between any of the previous listings as well. So if you find that maybe there's been some changes to the property over time and the county assessor's office hasn't reflected some of those changes, you can jump back to each of the listings individually to find out what details were added for each instance of this property being listed. So now that we've done a little bit of research, we can actually jump back into our quick residential search and we can get started on finding comparables. Now, the good news is a bunch of you guys have actually already provided a lot of the basic information that we are going to be searching by. Now, there's going to be three main elements that we need to search for. And I wanted to give you guys another opportunity to type out what you think would be best. So I'm going to keep track of that over here. And then we'll also put up another one with some spare items. So other criteria that you guys might want to search by. So first and foremost, Carrie, Karen, and Sandy had all mentioned finding properties with a certain status, which is great. So the status is actually one of the key elements that we need to use. Let's see, so we got active, pending, and closed was mentioned by Carrie and also Karen. That's excellent. So we got our status. Oh, and actually Robert just suggested some expired listings as well, especially now that the market is kind of calming down a little bit. We're finally able to see some of these expired listings. Those will become important in a bit here. We did have someone mention location, which is also another key element. Thank you for that, Donna. We'll just leave it at area for now. We also have the, let's do lot size. Number of bedrooms. Actually, let's go ahead and just mark number of bathrooms as well. Oh, and actually, Donna mentioned that one as well. Perfect. So what else would you guys be looking for? So again, we're going to be focusing in on at least these statuses. We're also going to be using a specific area. So this could be proximity search. It can also be like Robert just mentioned, school district, zip code, subdivision. What else? Oh, age. Yeah, the year built is another important one. This one actually is, at least in my opinion, one of the key elements for narrowing down the focus. If you guys have maybe a proximity search done where there's maybe not as clearly defined subdivision, or maybe even a subdivision that's had a bunch of resubs or something, and you've got properties that are made in the 70s in one part of the subdivision, and then properties made in the late 90s in another part. As unusual as that can be sometimes, it might be helpful to actually narrow it down by year built so that you're not just working with properties that are in that area, you're working with the properties that are actually more identical, more relevant as far as what the specifications are of the property that you're working with. All right, well, I'm actually going to run with these specifications for now. Let's go ahead and start discussing what we're going to be doing with these criteria. So first and foremost, as you guys mentioned, the status was the most important thing. I appreciate that a bunch of you guys actually mentioned this, because this is usually the one that I kind of have to pull out of people to get the answer. But so with the status, we actually have the active listings just automatically chosen. So if you guys get in to run a search in Matrix, it's just going to automatically have that active listing set. So without having to do any extra criteria, it's already built in there. We also have the option to do pending as well. And I wanted to point something out with pending. As soon as we checked the checkbox for it, You notice how it has 0 to 180 automatically added? I'm going to do the same thing for closed and expired, and you'll notice the exact same thing happened over to the right. Now, what this is actually providing us is the third item that we need to actually keep track of, time frame. Now, the default that we have in the system is that it's going to go for 6 months back. So as you guys can see, it's already got the 0 to 180 indicating the last 180 days. One of the cool things about having it set up this way is this 0 to 180 is on a sliding scale. So you don't have to manually go back and say, past 6 months, or go back specifically 6 months to try and find, all right, that's where I want it to start, that's where I want it to end, so on and so forth. It's just a sliding scale. You check the checkbox, last 6 months, you're good to go. Now you do have the option to expand that as well. I would very strongly suggest that you guys never go over a full year. Now, part of the reason why is because, as you guys probably become painfully aware of, the market dramatically shifts. So if you do end up having a property that sold, last April, it might be a radically different pricing than what it would be if it were trying to be sold today. So rather than find something that, happens to be the exact same specifications, but sold, a year and a half ago, you can end up with bad data that way. So you're just going to narrow it down to the last 6 months and then never go over a year. And then the area is another key element. This is going to be one that's a lot more variable. And especially for those of you guys who are working a little bit outside the more heavily populated areas, you may end up noticing that you actually practically have to just draw a space on the map for this. So I mentioned this first, proximity search, because we do actually have the option now to just put in a specific radius search around a specific address. So for instance, if I wanted to just check within 1 mile of that property I listed earlier, side drive, there we go. It automatically provided me with a little autofill option. And now my map area is selected. I've got 69 matches. It's a decent amount. And I can see all of the properties within that mile radius. Now, just as an example, we provided this. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing a full mile radius. Half a mile is going to be a little bit more realistic. And depending on which vendors you're working with, there's always a possibility that they may have even more restrictive criteria that they would like for you to use whenever you're searching for comparable properties. So just keep that in mind, that occasionally if you guys come up with a price point that's a little bit unusual or something that the bank isn't happy with or whatever, they may end up trying to validate whatever the search was that you guys created your CMA with. The good news is, as we'll see whenever we create our first quick CMA, it's going to automatically provide those search criteria, so that when you give that piece of paper either to your client or to the bank or to the lender, whatever, your broker even, you guys will have the information on there clarifying what exactly it was that you searched by. Now, I'm going to clear this out, and we're going to start with a brand new quick search. Let's actually start with a practical example. So I want to show you guys what it actually looks like. So I've got a subdivision out in Broken Arrow where there's a property that I'm going to be working with. And I'm going to narrow it down by Broken Arrow first. And then I'm also going to put in the subdivision's name. Now, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm actually adding the asterisk at the beginning and end of the phrase. So it's maybe the Eagle Ridge Estates or Eagle Ridge Resub 5 Amendment 20 or whatever it is. I mean, there's so many subdivisions where there's just so many parts and pieces. Perfect example for those of you guys here in Tulsa is Minchell Park. It's just a weird sprawling section, but there's 5 or 6 different subdivisions within the main subdivision. It's bizarre. But anyway, we've got Eagle Ridge here. And again, I've got my status set. I've got my time frame set, my city to try and narrow my focus, and then I've got my subdivision put in. again, with the asterisk at the beginning and end. When I go to my map, it looks like I've still got one dingleberry down here that's not part of the uh, subdivision that I was searching for. I always suggest that you guys narrow your focus with the map before you end up going to your results. Because oftentimes what I've noticed people will do is they'll just toss in the subdivision and then immediately go to the results. Then by the time they produce a report, they realize that there's some property that's, a mile away from the rest of the properties and is not even remotely relevant. In this case, it looks like it's what, 4 or 5 miles? Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to narrow this with a rectangle. I clicked on the rectangle tool up at the top, dragged my cursor down. It ended up creating this little rectangle for me to only have the properties within that shape be displayed. So now that I've been able to narrow that focus even further, I can now head to my results with confidence that I'm only seeing properties that are truly relevant, both from the time frame, the statuses that are available. We've got active, pending, closed, and then also because we've verified on the map that all of the properties are within the same vicinity. Now, if I needed to, I could also double check one last time to ensure that all the properties have the same year built. This is another dead giveaway beyond the map to make sure that we're not finding properties that are in a different part of the state, or maybe were built at a different time. But we've got all these properties pulled up now. And I'm just going to go up to the top here where we've got an all option. When I check the all option, it's going to check all of the listings that are on this search. It can be multiple pages of listings, and no matter what, it'll just select everything all at once. Now, I've got a quick CMA button down here at the very bottom. When I click that quick CMA button, it just automatically produces a report for me. I didn't have to do any design work on it. It's already had that stuff done. For those of you guys who have been through our basic matrix class, we discussed how to create the banner that appears up here at the top. I'll briefly mention that in case some of you guys haven't. But when we create that quick CMA using that simple quick CMA button, what we're seeing here is everything is going to be divided by the statuses that they're in. So we see all of our active collected together, just the one, fortunately, all the pending together, and just another one. But then down here in the closed section, I've got a bunch of these listings put together. And underneath each of the statuses is going to be a collection that just shows you the minimum, maximum, average, and median for those properties in that status type. So our closed is going to be a little bit more practical example. Fortunately, we don't have any good active or pending listings at the moment. But on this min, max, average, and median, you guys are going to see a bunch of different information that's going to be valuable to your client. So for instance, this sales versus list price is going to try and give you a ratio between what it sold for versus what it was initially listed as. So the minimum we see is 90.7. The maximum we see is just shy of 105%, but the average and median are almost exactly 100%. So it appears that there's actually a bunch of agents that are doing a really good job pricing these properties in this area, because it's providing you guys with a result that pretty much ensures that nobody's going to be getting way more or way less than their property. And this sold price is actually going to be pretty reliable. For instance, as an example, and I hope this isn't somebody in class, but we have a listing here that was 269,000, and when it sold for 244. Now, there's obviously some other specifications on here that we might want to discuss with our clients, but at least as far as raw data goes, this is actually providing me a pretty good estimate of what my property's value should be, depending on how many bedrooms, bathrooms, etc. Now, finally, we do have one section at the very, very bottom of the report, in this case, spilling over onto a separate page. But we've got down here the total listings. This is actually providing us the details for all of the listing properties at the moment, showing both the active, pending, and closed, even expired if we had any, all amalgamated into just a couple of statistics on here. So it shows us what the average square footage is, what the average bedroom count, bathroom count, so on and so forth, all the way down to this sales price versus list price. So if we needed to reinforce this with our clients, we can do that. And then finally, the quick statistics section, which again shows us the min, max, average, and median for list price, sales price, and sale versus list. Again, it's really trying to make sure that this is all highlighted for the client so that they understand what they're looking at. All right, so that's it for our quick CMA button. Let's say that we end up wanting to add in a little bit additional information. So for instance, if my client is working with maybe a little bit less understanding of what their neighborhood is like value-wise or what the market is like, we can actually go over here to this print option and give them additional information. So for instance, if maybe they didn't know what houses were available or what houses had sold recently, we can provide them with any of these client reports showing them either just the basic details of the property, which we saw already on the quick CMA. We also have a client thumbnail, which will give them a little bit more focus on the image that was attached to that listing, as well as a summary, full or full with all photos. These are going to be a little bit more robust. But I wanted to show you guys an even better option down here at the very bottom of this reports page. So you can have tons of customized reports and then the defaults. But at the very bottom, there's going to be these 5 reports that are just baked into the system. We've got the quick CMA, which is the old version. We've got the quick CMA 8.4, which is the one that we just saw that has a bunch of handy icons. It's very easy to describe to people because there's a bunch of images to associate with the criteria, the attributes. And then finally, we also have a 3-up comparison. Now, I'm a very visual person. That's how I view the world, see the world, whatever. So I really like having something besides just some numbers and addresses, so on and so forth. I want to see what property it was, especially if it's a property that was in my neighborhood. I might actually know that house or even know the people within it, but I didn't know what the address was. So I might like a little bit more of the simplified version of the CMA. Then I'm going to hold down Control or Command to select another item at the same time. So I'm going to do quick CMA, 3-up comparison, and now down at the bottom I can click Print to PDF. Now what it's going to be generating for me this time is the old version of the CMA. So notice there's no handy icons, everything's a little bit more dense, kind of collected everything onto one page in this case. We've got our quick statistics again. Notice it's missing that sales price versus list price explanation, but it's still present over here. And then down towards the bottom of this report, we've got a 3-up comparison that's going to go through each and every listing. Now, again, as a person that's very interested in seeing things rather than just reading about it, this could be incredibly helpful for me because I could be looking at this and say, oh, yeah, you know what? I know this house. I know the person that lives there. It's really nice inside. You know what? That actually does make sense. So I think that this could be helpful. Again, just remember that when you guys are trying to do this, the quick CMA button is just a click away. That's very easy to get to. But if you guys do end up wanting to add a little bit more information for your client, head over to the print section and choose one of these quick CMA options down at the bottom. And you can combine that with another option as well to make something that looks like this, for instance. There it goes. So we've got our summaries of all the properties. And then down here towards the bottom, we've got our, again, the quick CMA 8.4 is what this particular report is called. And then we've got our 3-up comparison down at the bottom so I can directly relate these to each other. All right, excellent. So let's hop back here, back to our results. And let's actually try a little bit more targeted search. So I'm going to go back to a blank quick residential search. And this time I actually have a property that had a listing on it previously. We're going to go ahead and create a new search for this other listing. So I'm going to add in pending and closed. I'm going to scroll down here to Turtle Creek. There we go. Excellent. All right. So I've got my, excuse me. So I've got my subdivision put in there. I'm going to head back over to my map. Again, just as a precaution to myself, I'm going to make sure that I'm not finding properties outside of where I was hoping to. And would you look at that? I already have a problem. So I'm going to use my draw rectangle tool again. Just draw it nice, big, and broad. Don't even have to be particularly specific about it. As long as I'm getting into the area that I was interested in, I can zoom in and double check. Yep, everything's in that subdivision that I was interested in. All right, so now that I've got all of my results narrowed down, I've got 24 results, which for those of you guys who are working out in the rural areas, that 24 results probably seems like a dream. I'm going to head over to our results though. I've got one active or pending, bunch closed. Again, I'm going to click this all button to select everything at once and do quick CMA. So just like we saw before, I have the statuses broken down with all of their own separate sections for the min, max, average, and median, and then something at the very bottom that kind of gets all of the data put together. But if this isn't enough for our client, we do have the option to switch over to the CMA report. Now, the CMA report can be extremely helpful if you guys have a little bit more explaining to do about your pricing recommendation. So I'm going to grab all of these listings and just head directly into the CMA report. Now, the CMA button allows us to effectively go through that same process that we did whenever we were adding listings into the system. Just out of curiosity, hit the raise hand button if you guys have the add edit permission. So if you guys already have the ability to add and edit your own listings, just hit that raise hand button down at the bottom of your screen. I'm just curious because if you guys haven't been through the add edit process before, this wizard section is going to be just a little bit unusual. So just a couple of you guys, that's okay. I mean, just as a heads up, this is the exact same process that you guys would be going through if you're adding a listing. So you start off on the very first page, trying to choose who you're going to be connecting this particular CMA to. Now, if you don't have a contact for this client already, you do have the option to create a new contact. And I would actually recommend that you go through this process of connecting this to a client, if only just because you're going to be able to keep that CMA on file for 6 months. So rather than limiting yourself to just creating this and then having to go back and recreate the exact same thing again if you need to adjust the price, instead we can actually connect this to them and then rerun that report later to try and find out if there's been any market changes or value changes, etc. So I'm going to connect this to George Foreman, and then I'm going to move on to the next step. So again, notice the arrow here indicating that we move from step to step to step, just like we do in add edit. Now on the pages side, when you first get in here, it's actually going to be blank. Now this isn't necessarily a bad thing. What it's trying to do is actually have you go through and add each of the different pages you would like. So for instance, under the cover section, I'm going to click that little plus to expand it. I see cover sheet with a photo as an option. That's the one that I would like to use. As soon as I add that page, you notice how it automatically comes up with the subject, cover, and comparable tabs, but not the map, adjustments, and pricing. Now, when I move on to the subjects and adjustments, I can put in either the summary list, price adjustments, or both. And actually, what I would like to do is actually add both at the same time. So instead of clicking on one individually and then the other, I'm going to click on the header for this section. And notice it just automatically adds both of those at the same time. Now, I still don't have a map or the pricing recommendation, but now I have an adjustments option because of the price adjustment section that I added. And finally, we have a comparables section here. This is where we're going to see the most information. This is usually the crucial stuff that you would need to show to your client. Some of these you may end up wanting to either omit depending on how much detail or data they actually need. But let's say that I wanted to add all of them at the same time. Again, I'm going to hit that comparables name, and it adds all 6 of those at once. Now, the pricing recommendation section got added, so you notice that now my pricing tab is open. There's also going to be a section here for static information. This isn't as important, I don't think. This is more just a a me thing, but I don't really necessarily want to have a bunch of documents and pages of words that I didn't write myself or that I didn't at least review. So what I would suggest that you guys do is at some point run through this process of creating a CMA and just add all of these at once. Just get one report that you make for yourself or for some client that's, not going to ask as many questions, just for your own edification. Find out what each of those pages contains to see if it is actually going to be valuable for you or your clients in the future. Now, in my case, I'm going to do this activity of timing, effective overpricing, benefits of using a realtor. Let's do importance of pricing and setting the price. So instead of doing all of these at once, I'm just going to add those specific ones. Now you notice I did skip over this my guarantee to you. I think the text in there is fine. I just didn't write it myself. So I kind of don't want to sign off on that. Now, the last thing that I needed to add on here is my CMA map. You notice the tab that's for map is still missing. So as soon as I click CMA map, I've got that map tab available. So now I've got all of my tabs available and I can actually move forward with my CMA report. Before we leave here though, I wanted to talk about these selected pages. So we started off by adding in my cover and of course then going straight into the subjects and adjustments. If I wanted to rearrange this at all, I can actually select certain pages. So for instance, if I wanted my pro report at the very end, my pricing recommendation at the very end, and then I wanted my CMA map to be the third thing that we see here after the cover sheet. I'm going to select it and then hit that up arrow to rearrange where it's physically located. So I've got my cover sheet, my summary list, my map, and then the price adjustments. If I needed to get rid of anything, so for instance, maybe I didn't need this price adjustments option, I can just hit that X and it'll get rid of that section. Same thing goes if I notice the importance of pricing, setting the price, kind of the same basic thing. I can just manually click on each of them and get rid of them. Now it's important to note as well, after we've gone through the process of selecting all of these, and especially if you guys have gone through and created a report for yourself, you may want to come back here, start a new report, create the page order that you would like, and then you can set that as a default. And the benefit of this, as you guys may have noticed whenever I opened up the CMA report option, is that it automatically adds all of those pages for the next time you open this up. So rather than having to go back and figure out, wait, was it importance of pricing or the process of pricing? What is the name of it? And having to figure out which one was which and whether you liked the setting versus whatever. Instead, you guys can just choose which ones you want, set it as a default, and then this whole process is practically going to be automated after that. Just as a reminder as well, those of you guys who have maybe some design team that you guys have with your office, or if you're comfortable with doing design work, there is an upload custom pages option, so that instead of just being limited to what's available on this available pages section, you can even add in any of the custom design work or pages of information or other things that you guys need to deliver to a seller and add those in as other pages. But I'm happy with this. I'm going to set it as my default. And again, the next time I try and create a CMA report, it's going to have all of this information available for me. All right, let's head over next to the subject tab. Now, as we mentioned before, one of the main uses that we have for the CMAs is trying to get the pricing set for a new listing. So in this case, what we're actually thinking about is the subject property, the property that we're going to be pricing out. Again, this could also be relevant for if you guys have a buyer that's trying to make sure that the property that they're interested in is priced properly. Now, in my case, I'm not going to have to fill these out manually because I do already have a listing that was put into the system previously. But we also have the option to just do a cross-property listing search. So if you don't already have the information in hand of what the previous listing number was, you do have the option to search for it. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and put in my listing number that I'd already researched. Again, I could have done that with my public record search that we discussed at the beginning. And since I have that listing number, I'm just going to go ahead and hit fill. Now, a couple things are missing from this particular listing, so we would have to maybe clear our remarks out, make sure that we know that this is Avenue instead of, there we go, instead of just East 93rd. We don't have a suffix to the street direction, so I think I should be set. It is 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. There's no full or half bath, so we don't have to worry about that. And we've got our square footage is already accurate, so we don't have to worry about messing with that either. It's already been mapped to a specific location according to that listing, but if we do end up in a situation where it had not been previously listed, we still want to make sure that the mapping for that particular property is in the correct spot. Again, we don't want to end up making a report and then our client takes a look at it. They're like, well, why does it show that the subject property is out in Tahlequah when I'm actually selling a property in Muskogee? So always make sure that it's located in the right spot. Part of the reason why I like using this example is because it is not. So we're looking at 25,451. If I click on this particular property, that is not the right one. I happen to know where it is located. It's right over here. But we also have the option to just manually type that information in. So if you wanted to search by a certain place, you can add that in there, hit locate, and it'll drop the pin for you. So it makes it just a little bit easier than having to manually adjust this. But I'm going to put this a little bit closer towards the front of the property. Go and hit done. Excellent. Oop, got it a few too many decibels in here. I can't remember, somebody explained this to me that after a certain number after the point here, that you're getting into things that are not feasible to actually keep track of. Like you're going to start getting into the centimeters, millimeters, so on and so forth, until you're getting down to an atomic level. It's just impractical to track that. So I could probably clear some of this off. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Now that we've got this all filled out, looks like our street suffix was actually south, and we're set. So I've got my cover photo already added. I'm going to hit cover. Here's my photo. Again, I get one more opportunity to add in a new photo if I do have one. And then we also have the ability to change our agent information. Now, I mentioned before, whenever we were talking about the CMA report, or the quick CMA, excuse me, the quick CMA has a header and footer that you actually have control over by going up to the top right and then going to settings. When you change your settings in there, you can change any of your contact information. You can change your header and footer. And then there's also a whole section that's just devoted to what your profile will be whenever you're sending off a CMA report. Now, the CMA reports, since this is kind of an introduction to your client, there's always a possibility that you might be sending information off to someone that you're not fully trusting yet. So you may end up wanting to provide maybe a business number or an office phone number rather than your personal cell number or something like that. So you have the ability to either edit the information permanently. We'll make it so that anytime I create the CMA report, it has different information than what I see here. Or what you guys can do is actually override this information for just this particular one. And that way your client only sees the information that you're wanting to distribute. So in this case, this is actually providing my office phone number. If I'm already sure that I'm going to be working with this client and I'm comfortable with giving them my cell phone number, I can just go in here, edit this information manually. 867-5309. There we go. So I got my cell number in there, and that way I can leave this information for this particular client rather than having to worry about accidentally giving out my cell number to somebody I'm not going to be in business with or that I don't trust. The next tab over is going to be our comparables tab. And this, thankfully, was something that we've already done. So without having to go through and try and find any previous listings or the active, pending, and closed, I already ran my search. I already checked the checkboxes for all of them and dumped them into this CMA report for me. Now, this does provide us with one final opportunity to review the particular comparables that I have. If you find that there's some properties in here that are actually not relevant, So for instance, if you keep noticing that my property has 3 bedrooms and a lot of the properties that have 3 bedrooms are in the like 220 area, 240 at the most, rather than being this 270 or 255 with 4 bedrooms, I can go through and actually remove those manually. So either selecting those right here, or I could probably make my life easier and just do a sort here, find out which ones are which. Those are all 4 bedrooms. And yeah, that should look about right. So these do have the same square footage. I can work with that. All right, so I'm gonna get rid of those, remove selected. But if we end up needing to add anything, so for instance, maybe I didn't find enough comparables, or maybe I didn't find the right comparables, I can always go add from listings, which brings us back to effectively just a search. So I can narrow down my search results a little further. So for instance, if I actually wanted to codify that I didn't want to see any bedroom counts that are higher than the one that I already have, I can put in 3, and that'll limit my results even further. So when I go to my results, no listings were found because I've already gotten all of them added. So now I can move on to my map. The map section is going to be really simple. Literally all it's doing is just giving you a preview. I think part of the reason why they even added in this map tab, because otherwise it could just be printed off on the report, you'd never even think about it. The map preview is giving you that one last opportunity to ensure that all the properties that you found are actually relevant, because you don't want to accidentally end up sending off a report with a bunch of properties that are just radically far away from wherever the property is you're working with, or finding things that are just not actually comparable. So in this case, looks like I've got all of the properties are located in that same subdivision, so I don't have to worry. I'm going to head over now to adjustments. Now, the adjustments section does require just a little bit of extra explanation. They recently simplified this down as well because there was a bunch of things that people just weren't using. But what the price adjustments tab is actually allowing us to do is go through the process of individually assigning value to each attribute of the properties. Now, what that means is that you as the real estate professional will get the opportunity to go through and say, all right, this particular property has 4 bedrooms. That extra bedroom is going to be worth, and again, don't take this as gospel. I'm just giving an example, but I'm going to say that's worth an extra $10,000. I'm also going to say that for this one as well, so $10,000. Now I wanted to indicate something real quick just to make sure you guys understand why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. The reason I said that this is worth $10,000 and then put a negative in front of it is because what I'm trying to do is actually set an adjusted price. What this adjusted price is going to allow me to do is actually ensure that instead of seeing properties at the value that they sold for when they have more or less, I'm going to actually be able to see the true value of that property if it was exactly comparable. So in this case, that extra bedroom was worth an extra $10,000. So I'm taking $10,000 off so that my client doesn't get the notion that their house is going to be higher value because of the properties that we found that were actually just a little bit dissimilar, but not dissimilar enough to just be omitted. So I've got my $10,000 removed from here. I'm going to move over. We got bathrooms. Pretty much everybody's the same. Nobody has a spare half bath. We've got our square foot total. This is going to be where we're also going to need to make some adjustments. Now, again, what the values are is something that you guys are going to have to sort out yourself. I don't have any recommendations on that besides check with your broker or see if you guys can get some information directly from an assessor, an appraiser, whatever. They're going to have a little bit more information on what the specific market conditions are, as well as what each attribute is going to be worth. So they may end up having an algorithm that they're using or an equation that they're using that's going to say, all right, what is an actual square foot worth? So if you have, 2,000 square feet, what's the market value of that if the specifications are identical to a property that has 1,500 square feet? So you can either use that algorithm or equation or whatever to get your numbers, or you guys can, ask another realtor, another broker, appraiser, whatever, what they think the value should be. So in this case, an extra what is this? 200 and some odd square feet is going to be worth an extra $2,000. Sure. So we'll do the same thing here. Excellent. And again, please don't take any of this seriously. I'm just doing this to fill in numbers. If I'm so radically off that it's distracting, just let me know in the chat. I can adjust that for future classes. But I've got all of that put in. Finally, we get down to the DOM section. Now, I mentioned before that including the expired listings can actually be really beneficial. I wanted to repeat that just to make sure you guys follow. Including the expired listings isn't something that you necessarily have to do for each time you're creating a CMA, but it can be beneficial if you end up in a situation where a client is trying to overvalue their property. So a perfect example could be that this particular client went on to Zillow and they saw the Zestimate for their property. And that Zestimate, which is just an automated function, might have given them a little bit higher value than what the true market value of their property is. So they come in with an expectation that this is going to be a property that's going to make them tons of money, and you have to kind of bring them down to earth. Now, sometimes that can be hard to do because, you know, maybe they've invested a lot of time and money and effort into making this house nice. So you need to come at that with just the raw data. Some people won't be open to that, but if we include those expired listings on there, what we can indicate to the client is that this particular property was listed for X amount of money. It was on the market for Y amount of days. And subsequently, it didn't end up getting sold until maybe it got relisted. Maybe it got relisted with a different price, and then it sold. So we can use those expired listings, or even just in this case, the days on market, to indicate to the client whether or not that pricing model actually worked for the previous listing. So in this case, a comparable listing. So if you guys do end up having days on market on here, it might be wise to verify whether or not they did end up going through any price decreases. It looks like most of these didn't even last 3 weeks, but if you had something that was on the market for, I don't know, let's say it was active and it had been on the market for 2 months without changing its price, I can maybe add in some note here, effectively just saying, this was on the market for way too long, so I would recommend, if it were my listing, to take $20,000 off. So you can add that information in there and then discuss that with the client afterwards. All right, so that's it for our adjustments tab. Now we get to our pricing recommendation. And this page is fairly simple. All we need to do on here is just go in and add in a suggested listing price. You notice there is a very stringent restriction on this, only 250 characters. I'm going to just put in something basic. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to go with median. I never trust averages. We'll do 200 to 210K. And I'm going to say that my pricing recommendation is $210,000. Perfect. So this is fairly simple, and I'm not trying to take up too much space. But then I also have a section down here for notes where you guys can expound on any of the information that you guys were working with to ensure that they're actually getting a true perspective of why you gave them that specific number. After you're done with that, you can head to this Finish tab. There's a Save button at the end here, which will save it onto this particular contact. Again, that's going to save that up for 6 months. It mentions that on page 1, but we also have the ability to view it and email it off to our client immediately if need be. Now, if you guys are going through this process, either along with the recording or with me live right now, you can always delete this in case you guys are just creating one just for the heck of it. That's not a problem at all, but you can just hit that delete button if you guys want to get rid of it. But I'm going to pull this up and we'll go ahead and take a look at it. So class is officially over now. If you guys were here from the start of class, you should be eligible for CE credit. I know somebody was having some technical issues. Britton, I'll see if I can get you the credit, but I'll have to double check what the attendance report says. Beyond that, we're all set. I'm going to go ahead and scroll through the report just so you guys can see what it looks like. But in the interim, if you have any questions, you can pose those now, or you guys can just dip thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate you joining us for classes. We're hoping that we're going to be getting back to doing outreach programs soon. We're finally doing in-person classes again, but it's all local stuff just for now. We're waiting on getting an actual outreach trainer hired and trained up before we resume going out to our outreach locations. But in the interim, stay safe. We're still not fully clear of this pandemic, but I'm excited to at least be able to host small classes again. We're making progress. We're almost out of it. Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Yeah, you're welcome. Have a good one. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close up shop. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have any questions beyond what you guys were able to ask here, you can always reach out to us at the service desk and we can assist you. Have a good one. Stay safe.